Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. I am Heather Peffley, clerk for the City of Manistee. The City Council's April 13th, 2021 work session being conducted remotely where all members of the City Council are in separate locations and not at the City Hall Council chambers will be called to order by Mayor Roger Zielinski shortly. As always, this work session is being recorded and will be broadcast on Manistee TV cable channels 189 and 190 and available at manisteetv.org. City Council and City staff will have video and audio available for this work session. Members of the public will be audio only. The microphones of all members of the City Council, the City Manager, and City Clerk will always be live unless there is an audio disruption. Mayor Zielinski, we are ready to proceed with the work session.
Thank you, Heather. I'll call the meeting to order. I was advised by Heather today that we are required to take roll call at virtual meetings, and council will need to remember to state our location. Heather, you want to take roll?
Yes, and I'll be doing roll call just for council. And again, please state your location. Let me make sure everybody's unmuted. Okay, Councilmember Bachman.
Here, reporting from Kissimmee, Florida.
Councilmember Beaton. You're muted. Let me
You're still muted, Linda.
Let's try that again. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. This is Beaton. I'm here at 256 Hughes Street in Manistee, Michigan.
Mayor Zielinski.
Here, I'm at my residence in Manistee, Michigan, Manistee County.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here in Manistee, Michigan.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski.
Here, Manistee, Michigan, Manistee County.
Councilmember Grabowski.
There, Cornell Street, Manistee.
And Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Here, Manistee, Michigan.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to public comments on work session related items. Each person in the virtual waiting room will be called individually by the city clerk by the last four digits of their telephone number. Excuse me. Individuals will be asked if they have a comment or if they are passing. It's very important that those giving comments have a good phone connection and no sound or noise ordinance in the background, such as television and all forms of audio should be muted. Otherwise, there will be a disruptive audio. If the issue cannot be corrected by the caller, we'll move on to the next person in line. The work session discussion topics for those that do not have an agenda are discussion on short-term rental, discussion of fiscal year 2021-2022 budget and capital improvement plan, discussion on capital improvement, shoreline, and streets. We'll now take public comments.
Members of the public, press *9 to raise your hand if you would like to make a comment. And then as I call on you, you will press *6 to unmute. Telephone number ending in 6203. Please unmute yourself and state your name and address.
Yes, Jen Teller, Harbor Drive, Manistee. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak in favor of support of the current number of short-term rentals in the city of Manistee. As a family of residential taxpayers since the 1880s, born and raised in Manistee and graduating from Manistee High School, we know the area quite well and appreciate all that Manistee has to offer. After spending much time reviewing the VRBO and Airbnb websites, there seems to be approximately 52 to 55 residences and apartments for short-term rentals currently in the city, not including condos or commercial entities. We hope all will be grandfathered in if they meet safety sanitation requirements. These rentals help to bring Manistee vacationers who help support the local economy through food and restaurant purchasers, downtown retail shopping, and all those who service these rentals, including local house cleaners, repair people, and lawn services. As the Chamber of Commerce has stated, this is vacation country, and vacationers bring in a lot of money to support the local economy. This income also has helped some homeowners pay their taxes and improve their properties, making neighborhoods more aesthetically pleasing. Pride of ownership becomes more important here. We would like to suggest that if you adopt any short-term rental ordinance, there would be a time period of 6 to 9 months for all those currently doing short-term rentals who were grandfathered in to submit their application for approval without restrictions except for meeting safety and sanitation regulations, posting of rental owner information and parking. Any new applications for such an STR designation after that date would have to meet all the requirements you approve. We're suggesting that perhaps a number of 75 would accommodate those who are on the short-term rental program now. Short-term rental fees should have the same fees as long-term rentals, with inspections also the same as long-term housing inspection requirements. This would be fair to all. In this day and age, privately owned residences and apartments help meet the current requirements of many visitors to the area who want the separation from close contact options like hotels, motels, and even campsites closely spaced. COVID-19 has certainly proven that. We hope you will consider these suggestions for your final draft. I thank you for your time. Jennifer Teller.
Thank you, Jennifer. Heather, I forgot to remind people to limit their comments to 5 minutes.
If there is anyone else who would like to make a public comment, please press *9 to raise your hand. And I'll give one more chance, *9 to raise your hand to make a public comment. Okay. Telephone number ending in 1299. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address. *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Tim Riley. I'm at 72 Spinnaker Drive in Manistee. I'm here to talk just kind of briefly about the short-term rental bill. I'm the rental manager for Century 21 Boardwalk Vacation Rentals. We manage about 55 properties in the area, about 35 of which are within the city limits. I've spoken to you before. I'm not going to rehash the things that I've said before. The only thing that I would like to bring up today is the inspection process that's currently in place. All of our properties do get the inspected and certification with the current rental program, but that rental program changed this past year. It was formerly being done by Spicer Group. It's now being done by Safe Built, I believe is the company. And it's been really challenging working with this current company. We have multiple properties that are awaiting certification right now. I think 4 or 5 of them that have been awaiting certification for weeks or months. Don't have any issues. He's just not giving us their certificate. It's difficult to get appointments to do viewings and showings and things like that. And then even when you send things, we don't get reports back from him. So I would just want to make sure, working with City Council, that you keep in mind that putting a new inspection process in place is going to require a lot of work. And I hope you guys, if you do go down that route, make sure that it's somebody that can actually enforce those inspections, because I don't believe that's happening now. That's all I have to say. Thank you for my time.
Thank you.
Telephone number ending in 9561. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address.
Hi, this is Suzanne Riley. I'm at 314 Lakeshore Drive in Manistee. I'm the owner of Century 21 Boardwalk. I just wanted to give full support of the first caller and everything that she had mentioned. And of course, I have full support of what Tim just discussed as well. I think trying to mimic Ludington's plans is not necessarily a good idea for Manistee. I think Manistee is what it is, completely different than Ludington. And I just hope that this group considers everything that Manistee has to offer in comparison with Ludington. So thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Please press *9 to raise your hand. Oh, got a couple more. Telephone number ending in 8035. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address.
Hi, this is Nikki Smith with West Shore Rental Management. I'm at 227 Parkdale Avenue. Similar to Tim Riley with Century 21, we have several rentals, both long-term, short-term, and vacation throughout Manistee County and specifically the city of Manistee. And I would like to also extend my support of Jen Teller's comments, as well as Tim's and Suzanne's. I do understand the importance of having a short-term rental ordinance in place, but I hope the restrictions that are discussed and decided upon will benefit bringing future rentals to the area, but more importantly, continue those that have been doing it and have been abiding by the current program in place. And that's all. Thank you.
Telephone number ending in 8118. Please unmute yourself and state your name and address.
This is Todd Lloyd, 556 First Street. I just wanted to make a comment on the amount of the annual fee. I think it should mimic more of month-to-month rentals. I think $2,000 is a little bit high. I don't want to detour people from investing in Manistee like I have. I also want to make sure that we don't stifle promoting tourism in Manistee. I think that having these short-term rentals brings a lot of families to the area. And I think that it's great for the community to have these families that come in and enjoy Manistee. That's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Please press *9. Mayor, I don't see any more hands going up. We're all set.
Thank you, Heather. First up, discussion on short-term rentals. City Manager, Mr. Taylor, you're up.
Yes, as my memo indicated, I worked out another draft for council's review. Just some of the areas that basically in general, I would like your feedback is on the entire draft, but specifically the number of short-term rentals in the residential district. The draft suggests 50, but that's just a placeholder because we don't know how many they actually are. The frequency of inspections, right now it's silent, and the assumption being that they would be inspected consistent with our current rental inspection ordinance, and then the amount of the licensing fee. So I would appreciate any input council might have on what we've offered. One of the things that we haven't included is, because we don't know exactly how council wishes to move forward, but in the case of if we have 75, I'm just throwing out a number of short-term rentals in a residential unit and council wishes to have 50, how do we get down to that 50 number? And, I would suggest attrition, but I wanted to have that conversation with council on what's an acceptable number in the residential zoning areas. So do you have any comments in general on the proposed ordinance?
I actually have a bunch of questions on this ordinance. My first question is, I think back in November or December, we talked about having HostNet or something like that. I can't remember, host services something like that give us the amount of rentals that we do have in the city? What happened to that?
Nothing, because once we get this in place, if council wants to know the exact number, because there's a couple of ways we could do it. We could, I think it's host compliance is who you're referring. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it was brought up that we needed to figure out the number that we had before we can put something in place.
And engaging with a company like that is one way we could do it. There's a cost associated with it and probably going to be $4,000 to $5,000. The other option we may have, if council's interested in it, is maybe we give the current short-term rental owners maybe a couple of months to get us information showing that they have a short-term rental in a residential area. And then at the end of that, maybe that's the number we settle on. So it's more the methodology of how council wants to determine that number.
Okay, I also think that waterfront needs to be unlimited too, because Dunes Drive vacation rentals and vacation rentals that are on the water are completely different from, you know, a mom and pop doing an Airbnb on 8th Street. It's two different units. So I think that waterfront needs to be unlimited with the commercial district and the condos.
Okay.
Any other council member have any opinion on how we should move forward in finding the number of rentals that we have?
I do. I have a couple of comments. I actually agree with everything that Jermaine has suggested. The only changes that I would like to see that I thought we had talked about was when you look at the limits of issuance of licenses in number 3, in the residential area, we have a small number of people, private homes, that stay in their homes full time, and they rent out a portion of their home as a short-term rental. I think those should be unlimited because they're the property manager, they're their owner, they're good ambassadors for our city, and they're right there, and the neighborhood feels comfortable that the owner is there. So I would like to just add that those should be unlimited. There's not going to be a lot. It'll free up some more spaces for other types of short-term rentals where they're being managed by property managers.
Anybody else have an opinion on that? Anybody else have anything for
Well,
Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I still got a few more things.
Go ahead, Jermaine.
So paying this host service, whatever it is, $4 or $5 grand is absolutely ridiculous to figure out how many rentals we have. Couldn't we get with Nikki at West Shore and Tim at Century 21 and I don't know if anybody else does vacation rentals, and figure out what they have in the residential district that's not waterfront, and then go from there to try to figure out a number. And then everybody else that's privately owned, they have to register, or, you know, we can figure out how many people, like Linda said, that are in home and rent out a part of their home. We could figure it out like that. Like, it's not that hard. I mean, this area is not that big. If everybody would get together and be on the same page, we could figure out how many are in the residential district, how many are condos, how many is in the commercial, and go from there.
And that's not, as you say, it's not difficult for them. We can work with the rental management firms. It's going to be a little bit more problematic for those individuals that might have 1 or 2 or 3. We just have to advertise and get their attention where they can come in and go on record.
Well, right, but isn't that the whole point of it, is to get them registered? So
it is. So I'm just saying, it's easy to work with the rental management agencies and determine that. I'm just pointing out it's going to be a little bit more difficult and more time consuming to get those that aren't using a rental management agency, but it can be accomplished.
Okay. Can I keep going with my questions, or?
You're on a roll. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. So my next one is under the license and regulations. It says that they need to designate in writing with the city part of their application, the name, address, blah, 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 all of that. but they have to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's insane. Like who's going to regulate that? Like who? I don't understand that at all.
Well, we felt it was important to have someone, whether it's the owner or an agent of the owner, that if needed, we can contact them and they can respond in a timely fashion to whatever the complaint is. That's the intent.
That seems a little excessive though. Like somebody has to be available and they have to have somebody within 30 miles of the city to answer a complaint.
Well, they have to be able to respond to a complaint as necessary. And it could be as easy as, getting your cell phone number. It's pretty portable. It goes with you wherever you are. We just, we want some, if we need some action taken, we need to be able to get a hold of the owner or agent to take action.
So if we couldn't contact somebody, what action would be taken?
Well, it depends on what the situation is. If it's a bunch of loud, tenants, or as an example, if there's some kind of a structural problem with the building, maybe there's a water leak, everything's going to be different.
Okay, well, that brings me to my next point, because back in November, like the police department stood up and said they don't have an issue with short-term renters. Like that's not even on their radar. Like nobody has a problem with that. And I feel like adding all this stuff in here is just creating more problems. Like no fireworks shall be ignited or discharged on the premises for short-term rentals except in ordinance chapter 663. So the police department's going to have to go, if they get a call, they're going to have to go and try to figure out if it's the homeowner there for the weekend or a renter there for the weekend, and then figure out if they give them a citation or whatnot. Like that just seems excessive to me that you're putting all these restrictions on here.
Well, with that example, you're citing number 5 of the fireworks. We're requiring a copy of that specific chapter be displayed in the unit, because if somebody comes up from Troy, Michigan, they most likely don't know that you can't shoot off fireworks 365 days a year.
But on the other side of that, you also have long-term renters that don't know they can't shoot off fireworks 365 days a year.
Right.
So
Fully understand.
I just feel like we're creating more issues than what needs to be with these short-term rentals, because more people have been in favor of keeping the short-term rentals and not, putting all these restrictions on it than people that have been. And I feel like the police department have enough shit on their plate to deal with, and to add, short-term rentals and, you can't park here, you can't park here. Like, I get that. There should be, regulations on how many people can stay in a unit. They can't be parking on the curb. They can't be parking on the grass. They have to be in the driveway or the sidewalk. But to add, somebody's got to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You got to post this about, it's just complicating things. And I don't understand why we're doing that.
Well, I just want to point out, we're not requiring that somebody be on the premise, 24/7. Rather, we're saying we need to be able to contact someone, and someone, if needed, has to be able to respond within 30 minutes.
Okay, but am I the only one that seems excessive to have somebody on call 24 hours a day if the phone should ring? I mean, if it's an emergency.
I don't know if it's excessive. I know the police are going to be called irregardless. If there's a complaint, they're going to have to go. How they deal with the complaint is going to be determined by whether it's a short-term rental or whether they issue a ticket and go on with their way. If it's a short-term rental, I think I hear Mr. Taylor saying, or I think I read into this, that they would contact the person in charge and try to resolve the situation without issuing a citation or going any further. Is that not correct, Mr. Taylor?
That's it. If our police officers don't have to get in the middle of something, if they can just call, maybe they go to a noise complaint. They give the tenants warning, they get another one. this gives them an option to call the property owner and say, we've warned your tenants once, take care of the problem or we're going to start issuing citations. So it's a way to work through problems without going to a citation issue unless absolutely necessary.
I just feel like we're creating more problems with the short-term rentals and avoiding the bigger issues that need to be fixed. Like, tell the people that are doing vacation rentals, post your name and number on the door or the refrigerator or what, and leave it at that. Like, it doesn't have to be, somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't even understand why we're making such a big issue out of this and not in avoiding the long-term rentals, which is a bigger issue for the residents that live here. It boggles my mind that we're even discussing this.
Well, then my only response is because that's the direction we got from council, that they wanted an ordinance for short-term rentals.
I understand that there needs to be an ordinance, but I also feel like some of us are not listening to what others are saying. Like, basically it was just copy and pasted from Ludington's ordinance, and this is how we should do. And I don't think that's right.
Mr. Taylor, I'm sure you've looked at other ordinances, short-term rental ordinances in different communities. How does ours compare with other communities?
I think I would say we're probably on par in terms of setting up regulations, in terms of having some violations and penalties, how we can revoke a license if it gets to that point. Trying to regulate the numbers. I have not seen in other ordinances that many of them, if any, regulate by zoning district. I think that's something a little unique to this. It's pretty standard. We looked at different ordinances. City attorney probably took a deeper dive than I did on it. And this was the result.
Do you need more information to move forward? Do you need a consensus from council, Mr. Taylor? What do you need?
Well, the consensus I'm hearing is very little collective displeasure with the draft. Some individual displeasure on certain things but collectively, I'm just by the absence of any comments, it seems like the majority of council is okay with this draft. And the issue is right now trying to figure out how many we have and make some modifications for some other different categories where we're unlimited.
I think that I'm just trying to explain. If everybody would just drive around and look at the vacation rentals and then turn around and look at our long-term rentals, you would see why I'm having such a problem with this. Like, our short-term rentals, they keep up on their properties. They're up to date. They're up to code. They do their inspections. There's a few that I'm sure have probably fallen through the cracks, but people aren't going to come here and vacation and stay in a house that's falling down. So my problem is we're spending so much time on these vacation rentals trying to put down this ordinance and cap it at 50 in the residential, and nobody's looking at the long-term rentals, which should have way more restrictions and have way more regulations on them. That's my whole issue with this.
Well, from the staff's perspective, if council's no longer interested in a short-term rental ordinance, we can put this on the shelf, and if at a later date there's more interest, we can dust it off and bring it back.
I think we should have a rental ordinance. Like, I think they should be regulated. They should pay a fee like the long-term rentals, but putting a cap on it right now when we have no idea what we're even dealing with is ridiculous. And I think that we should move on from this and fix the bigger problem, which is our long-term rentals. And those are the residents of Manistee that need our help to get their places cleaned up, because they have landlords that are nowhere around and a rental management company that can't keep up with the stuff that they were dumped on. Like there is 2 duplexes that I know of that are still waiting for their rental inspection from January, and it's almost May. So I think that we need to work on bigger problems than figuring out a number to limit vacation rentals at the moment.
Any other council members have any suggestions, opinions?
Well,
Linda
Grabowski
is
here.
muted again, and she's trying to speak.
Okay.
Sorry, Councilmember Grabowski. She's been trying to talk for a while, and somehow she keeps
I'll
getting
try to be
muted.
quicker. All right, I need a definition of why the 30 days. Does the 30 days pertain to one person renting longer than 30 days, or is it 30 days total for the year that they can rent as a short-term rental? I think that needs to be defined. I'm confused by that 30 days.
Well, it's not the collective days, you know, throughout the year. That's a distinction that we've seen in other ordinances of, you know, if you're renting it out for a period of less than one number that I saw quite often was 28 days. If you're renting for less than, you know, 28 days at a stretch, that differentiates between year-round rental.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to say vacation here for 6 weeks and signed a contract, would that not be allowed? I guess I'm still confused.
Not as a short-term rental.
Okay. I'll let that one go. I don't know right offhand where we go as far as our rental program is set up. Is it set up currently to distinguish between short-term rentals and regular long-term rentals in the system?
They've made some changes to their database because it was never tracked in that fashion. And I brought it up to them when this came up about short-term rentals, and they were going to modify their database. So when they're doing inspections, they can determine whether it's a short-term or long-term. And eventually it'll be some time, but we'll have a pretty solid data on the number of long-term versus the number of short-term.
Do you know when we might have that number?
Well, once they get through all the inspections, you know, this is actually the first year of their inspections because, you know, last year with the COVID, you know, they weren't doing much. So it's going to take probably a couple of years to get a really solid number.
Dad, are they having a real problem with getting the inspections done?
Well, it's the issue is that as a company, Safe Built was very reluctant to go into, you know, occupied residence any more than they had to. You know, doing a as I was going to say, a roofing permit or a siding permit or a deck permit or whatever, something outdoors they were more more tolerant for them. But you know, it just took a time for them to be comfortable in going inside into homes that they don't know what the status is.
Have they had any problems? Have they told you of any problems going in?
Oh, no, he's not, the building inspector has not raised any issue about not being able to gain access to any properties. It's not, that's not been an issue that's been voiced to me.
I know we can't take a vote, but is there any council member any of the council that does not want to proceed with a rental agreement, or do we want to proceed?
I want to proceed with some tweaks on it.
This is Mick Szymanski. I've got a few comments that I'd like to make. I think in general terms, I agree with the principle that short and long-term rentals should share in the same health and safety requirements. And I think we discussed that in the past. We want our long-term rentals to have the same opportunity to have a quality place as we do for our short-term rental people. My concern and why I do believe that we should have some understanding of how many we currently have is not so much to limit what we have now, but to have some kind of management over just unlimited growth in the short-term rental business, because that's going to cause our challenge with long-term rentals. You can't have both, right? I mean, we have a problem already in Manistee with availability of long-term rentals, especially like Jermaine has said, with quality long-term rentals that are affordable. So I want to make sure that what we set in place will still make it a good business opportunity for people to be in the long-term rental business, so that we can sustain some growth within our community. That's one of the areas that, you know, we're kind of stifled with. And I don't know how many times I've heard people that have come new to Manistee, how challenged they are trying to find a place to stay that they can afford, that is of a reasonable quality. I would like to know, though, how many currently we have registered short and long term. Do we have that number?
We should have a real good idea of what that is. I've got to check with the building inspector. I can find out how many he's got currently on registration.
Yeah, because that's what I'd be curious. How many people have actually gone through the process to date and have actually registered with the city of Manistee to be in the long or the short-term rental business? I do agree that, you know, those people who have you know, been doing this as a living and have made investments, we should be able to figure out how to grandfather them into the system. But then we have to look at how are we going to control growth after that point. And that's where I think once we have some idea of how many are currently out there, how many there's, and how many more can we reasonably have in the city of Manistee as far as short-term rentals without further impacting the ability for people to move to Manistee and find a rental? That's the challenge. As far as the rules, you know, I don't necessarily disagree that having things reiterated in the short-term rental agreement that are already ordinances is not unreasonable. To let people know when our quiet hours are, to let them know that, you know, we don't shoot fireworks off except for certain days of the year. I don't consider that to be unreasonable. I think that, as you state, the people that are coming here for just a short period of time, or even if they're here as a rental, I think they should have things like that in their contract so they understand a little bit about what we expect from people who are residing in our community. So I am in favor of proceeding with short-term rentals, but I would like to, you know, again, have a real sound basis for the numbers that we come up with. So we really know what we currently have, and then how much growth can we anticipate without, like I said, having damage to our long-term rental program.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is that it seems like council wants to know how many we have currently. And we can take, you know, I can take the approach I described earlier, reaching out to the known rental management firms, get their information, get some publicity through the newspaper, website, Facebook. Anyone that has a short-term rental, please contact the city so we can document it, because we want to find out the number. And then whenever we get what we feel is a good number, then we can come back and have a further discussion with council, because, you know, I have some ideas on how we can manage it. And I'm just going to throw out numbers. If council's goal is to have 50, no more than 50 in a residential unit or district, and we currently have 75, you know, there's processes that you could have that the property, and if it turns over, turns over owners, it can't do that unless there's less than 50. So, you know, if somebody wants to dispose of a short-term rental, they wouldn't get their license renewed if the number was over 50, as an example. So I think there's some ways to grandfather people in, but still manage the number and get it down to whatever council's desired goal is. So
What if we came up with it to grandfather in the ones that are registered now and are compliance with the city, and then starting whatever, like January 1st or whatever, somebody that buys a home, like some of the condos do, you have to own it for 2 years before you can rent it out as a vacation rental.
well, the problem is then that opens the door to have more than council may want in the city.
Okay.
No,
The
what I'm
problem I
saying,
have with the number is that even if we increase the number, if you look at the graphs and the information that's already been shared with us as the density of where all these short-term rentals are, they tend to be all on the north side. So I would prefer to see them more evenly dispersed throughout the entire city than have everybody end up on the north side, because we have neighborhoods here. And you know, if people would like to feel comfortable in their neighborhood. So
Well, you have more on the north side than you do on my side because you're closer to the water. So that's why you have more rentals, because you're within walking distance to the water.
that
mean-
may be true, but we still have two public beaches on each side of the river.
I thought in previous meetings that we had discussed if the condos or whatever unit that was going to be for short-term rental would be decided by the association.
We did.
And that wouldn't be
Yes.
part of, okay, so we're still
Yeah.
on that same page.
yeah,
Yeah.
what
That's
I'm
fine.
suggesting is unlimited for condominium developments containing individual units or more. That's, you can have as many as you want there.
Okay.
And anything that's zoned commercial, you could have unlimited there because that's a business oriented zone. And so it just comes down to how many do we want in residential districts.
Right.
So I guess at this point, I would recommend to council that just have staff try to determine as best they can without expending money, how many short-term rentals we currently have by district. And then I'll come back and we can have another discussion.
Right.
I still think
Mr. Taylor?
waterfront needs to be unlimited too, because waterfront is different than the housing on the north side or the other side of the river.
I've made a note to at least add it to the list for discussion, as well as unlimited number of owner occupied short-term rentals.
Yep.
That will be included when I bring back another draft.
Mr. Taylor, one of the things I would like to know also is how many long-term rental units we currently have as well.
Yep, and I do have
Because-
that noted.
Yeah, okay, because like I said, my concern is that if it's so lucrative to go into the short-term rental, then people are going to give up the long-term rental business, and it'll further exacerbate the issue we currently have.
Mhm.
And I do have one other thing. Instead of having it for 30 days or less, I would think it would be better if it would be like 60 days or less. I think that's a little too short of a time frame,
Okay.
especially in the summertime.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Sean. Just for a frame of reference, it's been a little while since we've been in the, doing the rental program. But when we were doing it, there was about 1,000 to 1,100 units. And those included both long-term and short-term. And at the time when we were doing it, Chris was pretty familiar, and she might be able to help you a little bit if going through the list and highlighting what she believes to be short-term. It may not take very long to that if it helps you to get to your goal of
Okay,
identifying.
appreciate that.
And maybe the numbers changed some, but that's roughly what it was when we left the program.
Anybody else? Mr. Taylor, do you have enough to do another draft?
Yeah, I can get there.
Okay. Last call. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. We're we're going a little bit out of order tonight. Staff wanted to take D, discussion on capital improvements, shoreline and streets. So next, Public Works Director Jeff McCullough and Engineer of Record Sean Middleton, you're up.
Can I
Sean,
interrupt
are
for 1
you-
second? And just let the public know, this is not time for public comment. So if you're raising your hand, I am lowering it. It is not time for public comment. Sorry, go ahead.
Heather, can you make it so I can share my screen?
Sure. There you go.
So we put together just a very short PowerPoint just to bring council up to speed on where we're at with the capital improvement bond and the projects. The bond proceeds have to be spent over a 3-year period. So we have started just about every one of them, and they're in different stages of progress. If you can move to the next slide. So the capital improvement projects are kind of bundled together into shoreline projects, park projects, marina projects, roofing projects, fire station improvements, street and utility, and then water department specific items. So on the shoreline projects, last fall, we contracted to have some of the damaged North Beach access repaired. And first the contractor placed riprap, armor stone, and we had a pretty large storm very soon after that. So sheet piling was added, and it seems pretty secure at this point. Just recently this spring, they finished up the woodwork, and we actually changed the stairwell from it used to go down to the west, and we've now moved it to the south of that deck platform, just so that the protection that we place there isn't a hindrance to get down to the beach level. And then later this spring, there should be, the contractor will be planting dune grass. The other one that falls under this category is the flooding that we've been receiving at Fifth Avenue and Lakeshore Road in the past 2-3 years. And that the issues that we're having there is basically when we get a strong westerly wind, the wave run up is coming primarily down the sidewalk along the Coast Guard station out to Fifth Avenue Pier. But at times it even comes up the beach and tips into the cul-de-sac at the west end of Fifth Avenue. So we're under discussion on how to do some temporary, and when I say temporary, it is when a storm, when we're in a storm condition, we can place pretty quickly temporary measures to reduce the amount of water that's coming in, and then remove that when the storm is passed. The other thing is all the storm sewer in the residential area of Fifth Avenue has one outlet, and it's a fairly small outlet, and it is currently submerged below the current water levels. So we are proposing to put in a second outlet that would be at a higher elevation. So on a normal basis, it would not necessarily drain water out of the streets, but when we get high water levels, it will help drain the streets out even faster. And we're working on the design of that and expect to complete the work this year. In addition, we've got the shoreline work down at First Street Beach. We applied for the permits back in September to both Eagle and the Corps of Engineers, and we received the Eagle permit pretty quickly, actually, and we have yet to receive the Corps permit. The contract's been awarded. The contractor has mobilized. If you've been down to the beach, it's hard to miss that. They've been stockpiling stone. We had a short halt while the frost laws were on. Those have been lifted, so the trucking can resume, but they're really waiting to begin work in earnest once we receive the Corps of Engineer permit. Last week, we were informed that they were finishing up an environmental assessment that the Corps is doing internally. And we hope that once that is completed, that the permit will be issued. Our target was to have the Riverwalk restored and open back up before the 4th of July. We are not confident or absolutely sure that that can happen because of the permit delays. But we'll do the best we can on that. In the parks, the North Riverwalk, also called Memorial Park, we plan to do a complete renovation of that park, including removing the overgrown landscaping items that are within that park, replacing the walkways, the steps, and the retaining walls, and to try to make it safer and more friendly to pedestrians. And then also our plan was to install lighting through that park to improve the safety aspects of it. We applied for a recreation grant with the DNR last year. We were not successful in receiving the grant on that first application, but we were pretty close and are hopeful that a subsequent application will be successful. As you approved in the last meeting, working with Networks Northwest to update our 5-year Parks and Recreation plan. Once that plan has been updated, then we'll be able to apply for the next round of funding in the spring of 22. The city marina, as you recall, the insurance claim for the SAISH damage replaced all but 5 of the docks at the city marina. So we've been working for a couple of years to try to seek grant funding to assist us in replacing those last 5 docks. We applied in 2020 and were not successful with the waterways application. We just submitted 2 weeks ago on the 2021 round, and the DNR has confirmed that that our application is complete, and so we're just waiting for that to be scored. I'll let either Ed or Sean go through the roofing projects.
I can take it, Ed, and just jump in if I'm off base here. So
Okay, thanks, Sean.
So the roofing projects, we put together a package. We're working with Garland, a company that supplies a certain product. And we bid it out. We had our pre-construction meeting just yesterday. And we got the schedule from the contractor, and this is kind of rough, but generally what they're looking at doing from a schedule standpoint is the DDA, restrooms, and the bridge house, kind of the smaller projects downtown in April. Then moving on to City Hall, that will probably take closer to 3 weeks to a month to complete in May. And then likely moving on to the wastewater treatment plant in June, and then finishing up with all the pump well houses later in June, July. And that's a certain roofing product they'll be doing with that. That's not a standard shingle. The shingle projects are going to be the fire station and the waterworks building. And both of those being historic buildings, we're working on getting the colors picked out so they're in line with historic preservation. And then they'll have to get those materials ordered. And then so their schedule on those is really material dependent. And when those arrive, we'll probably know a little bit more about that shortly once we get those orders in and we have materials being shipped. But again, all to be done this summer. I guess I can just hit this
Yeah,
one.
just do that one too, Sean.
Yeah, so I already mentioned that the fire station will be getting a new roof this year. There's other improvements, the brick, the facade of the building, the brick has got some deterioration. We're working with Mark on, some of the details of the project, but we're looking at doing these improvements probably next year. There's some discussion on doing them this year, but with everything we have going this year, we thought it better to get the roof done in place, get a design, work through the design details with Mark, and then get it out to bid this winter for next year's construction. And some of the items include, the building envelope with the brick replacement, windows, doors, rear lot parking improvements, a little expansion there, front entrance drive improvements. And, Mark, if Mark is on, if there's anything I'm missing, just let me know. But those are kind of the baseline major items. I think there's a little work interior we don't work on.
Under the street and utility projects, we've got a plan, and we've got the plans just about completed, and believe we'll be advertising for bids within a couple weeks to add a new water main loop on the Jackson and Van Buren streets, and then do complete road reconstructions. And then also 8th Street from US 31 to Hopkins Street, which is the top of the hill where we stopped construction last year. And that will include storm sewer improvements and full road reconstruction. And we expect those projects will be completed this fall. Also included in the capital improvement bond were replacements of water and sewer main that used to be attached to the bridge over M55 or on M55 over the Big Manistee River. The new pipelines were actually directionally drilled, and so they loop underneath the river. Those were installed in February, and within a week or two, they were put back in service, and so that project is, for all intents and purposes, completed. In addition, we have had Quincy and Cleveland reconstruction on our capital improvement list and in our transportation improvement list for at least 3 or 4 years. That work is slated for 2022. And really what drives the time frame on that is the money to reconstruct the streets. And then we also put in within the capital improvement is some of the costs for the water main and some of the sewer upgrades. And then the state of Michigan 2 years ago came out with a new Category B grant, which funds specifically local street paving. And so while that project was already on our radar screen, we intend to submit a grant hoping to get some additional funding for that project. And if successful, then the money could be spent on other street paving in the near future. We plan to come to City Council at your next meeting with a resolution in support of that grant application. And then the last one on this sheet is actually quite complex. The state of Michigan is planning on doing a major structural rehab on the US 31 Memorial Bridge in 2023. And in anticipation of that and the detour work the detour routes that are required for a long-term closure, we have applied for and received grants to upgrade Maple Street Bridge. And we have started the local agency process on that through MDOT. And we expect to have Maple Street Bridge work completed over this winter. And then we have planned for some water main upgrades on Washington Street prior to some paving upgrades and then reconstruction of Memorial Drive. That is hinging largely on the state of Michigan participating in the pavement portions of Memorial and Washington Street, because that is part of the detour and puts a lot of impact on our streets. Currently, and I just had conversations today, that the state is severely over budget on the Memorial Bridge upgrades, and they are not willing to dedicate very much money towards the detour improvements. So we are climbing the chain of command to the regional director, and then to Lansing to try to replace or put back in place the funding that had been expected to support the detour improvements. So that'll be a very challenging year in 2023 when that bridge is closed. Also, in anticipation of, we inspect the 2 water towers every 5 years. So based on the inspections that we had 5 years prior, we put placeholders and funds in the capital improvement bond for upgrades that we anticipated would be coming for the Maywood tank, which could include possible interior painting, and then the industrial tank, which could include exterior painting. We've got the inspection reports back on Maywood, and then just yesterday we received the inspection reports on the industrial tank. So we'll be working through what those recommendations are from those specialized engineers and then planning out projects accordingly. So before we get into question and answer, I just wanted to be clear that this is not a list of all the projects that the city is doing. It is just the projects that were specifically included in that capital improvement bond. And Ed and Sean and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions, council?
This is Mick Szymanski. Is there an opportunity for any ARP funding to go towards the Memorial Park in that project?
There
Or
could
is
be
it just too soon to tell?
opportunities. We've been waiting for guidance on how those funds, how much the funds will be provided to the community, to Manistee, but then also specifically what they can be used for. And I think Thad has maybe a little bit more information than he's gotten through the MML.
Councilmember Szymanski, I can talk to that a little bit. With the preliminary guidance that has been issued, it probably would not qualify for that project. But there are going to be more guidance forthcoming over the next several weeks, probably not until May, though. I think they'll take most of the rest of this month. It was advertised as being very flexible spending, but the way it's looking, it's not as flexible as perhaps people were anticipating. But until we get some further guidance, we just won't know.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Last chance. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Moving on to our last item, discussion on the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget and capital improvement plan. City Manager, Mr. Taylor, and Finance Director, Mr. Bradford.
Well, I'm going to let Ed steal the show. It's his, he put the most time and effort into it, and as a result, we got a great product that is balanced, it's realistic, it addresses all of council's expressed priorities, and also accounts for some potential spending of the American Recovery Plan funds, given the guidance as we know it to date. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed and let him go with it.
Thanks, Thad. Council, I realized last week it was a little hard to hear. I had a microphone issue. Hopefully, by turning up your volume, you're able to catch a lot of that. But I'm happy to discuss any part of the budget. I'll share my screen so we can actually see where the questions are in the actual budget document. I think one thing before we get into questions, the whole question about the ARP Act funds is an interesting one, because there's the potential there to do a lot of good for the community, but until we get that guidance from the U.S. Treasury and from the state, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage in trying to budget for that. So we did include some money in the budget for things that look like they probably would qualify based on the preliminary guidance, but it's only a fraction of what we're expected to get. And also keep in mind, we have 3 years to spend that money, which is going to be helpful, because one of the items that we can fund are revenue losses related to the pandemic, which we haven't had yet, but those could materialize down the road. And the other thing to keep in mind is it's going to be paid out in 2 payments over 2 years, not all in a lump sum. So with that, I guess I can take any questions, and I'll share my screen here with the budget momentarily.
Council, do we have any questions or concerns?
Ed, I have a question. Tell me, what's Housing North in the 40,000 appropriation to them? I don't have any history on that.
Okay, how's it? First of all, we're suggesting a $20,000 contribution. Housing North is a regional group that works on housing issues. And one of their newer initiatives is that certain communities in Northwest Michigan can contract with Housing North for a full-time position. As an example, there's one in, I believe it's Antrim County, and one in the Petoskey area. And so we're looking at a similar program. We've been meeting for probably a year and a half, just keeping in touch. But we've got interest from myself representing the city, the county's interested, United Way's interested, the DDA's already budgeted monies towards that position, and the Community Foundation is interested. And what we're trying to do is amass somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 to have someone work on housing issues in the county. Specifically in the city, one of my objectives would be someone that could work in the neighborhoods, potentially using the neighborhood enterprise zone that's offered through the state, that we could work with homeowners, and hopefully with some receptive financial institutions that would give a reduced rate for home improvements, where we could start impacting the quality of our housing stock in the neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks. Would that be like a 20-year project or 1-year project? Or is it something that's going to be happening all the time?
Well, it's what we're wanting to do is a 3-year commitment from all funding sources, because you just can't do the program justice in a year. And so we figured 3 is that we can prove to the community that it's going to work or it's not.
And
Okay,
Councilmember
perfect. Thank you.
Bachman, the budget also is proposing that be funded with ARP Act money. So it's a direct offset. There's not general fund money available for that initiative at this point.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Linda's trying to get through.
You're muted, Linda.
It's a problem for me. Okay, going back to our contribution to the chamber, it went from 20,000 to 40,000. I need to know why it's proposed to double.
Well, 2 reasons. I personally think that the chamber has shown more than shown their value as an economic development development team for our community. Just look at the number of projects that they're working on just within the city. Number two, based on the limited information we have on and guidance for the ARP funds, we figured that that would be eligible because it said to respond to the pandemic or its negative economic impacts, including assistance of household, small business, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. There's others in their funding consortium that are increasing their contributions. Not everybody 20,000, but whatever they can afford. The goal being that they would hire another person to help with economic development in the county. Did that answer your question?
It does. I just wondered how you put a number to that, how you doubled it. That's all. I also have some concerns. You know, I mean, the Hampton Inn project has drawn a number of comments from the public. Has anybody from the chamber talked to the hotel owners along 31? I know I've talked to one at least, and you know, everybody's a little bit nervous about the Hampton Inn, I'm sure, if you're a hotel owner. I don't know if you understand it, that in the summertime, people come into our town and they book a room and they you know, they arrive early and they want their luggage stored in the lobby and they want to change into their beach clothes in the restrooms on the first floor of the hotel, and then try to make a one-night stay into a 2-day event at the beach. So they are utilizing our beaches as well. But I do think it's only fair that if you're going to promote the Hampton Inn, at least offer some assistance or at least have a conversation with the hotel owners. And I don't know if that's been done yet. I had mentioned that to Mark Miller several months ago.
And I don't know specifically if that's been done. I know they're open to assistance through the chamber, through business retention visits, different things like that. And, you know, please don't get the idea that the chamber or the city is trying to play favorites. We just have a development opportunity that we're trying to work with the development team in the community to make it happen. And so that's the direction there. But, you know, I'm comfortable that there are opportunities for those hotels along 31. If they need the assistance of the chamber, that's what they're there for, because one of their big missions is business retention. But given all the new development that's been going on in the community, it makes it a little bit more difficult to focus as much time as they might like on business retention. Hence the outreach to increase funding so they can hire someone else. It's just, they're a victim, in my mind, they're a victim of their own success. There's so many things going on based on their outreach and the reputation, the positive reputation that the city's gained, that they're busting at the seams.
Councilmember Beaton, I want to just point out too that that increase was slated to be funded by the ARP dollars, because it's a direct correlation to one of the things that they said is an eligible cost. So if that were to be funded, it could be sustained over a 3-year period. After that, there would have to be a determination made whether the general fund wanted to, you know, continue to support that, assuming it survived the budget over that time period.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Ed.
I have a question. So I'm not real comfortable doubling the amount that for Housing North in the chamber from 20 to 40,000. Just because we don't know exactly what we can use those funds on. So we shouldn't, I mean, we could probably use those funds on other things once you get the okay to do that. So I feel like we shouldn't put a number on those two right now. And then I just have a question, so I hope not everybody bites my head off about this, but I am curious as to why every year there's 50,000 for the Ramsdale.
Well, I'll respond to part of your questions. Number one, we've not doubled the contribution to Housing North. That's a new initiative. We've never,
Okay.
so it's just $20,000. And again, the $20,000 increase to the chamber is to help them, along with other funders, to secure another position that they can have on their team to work on an economic development. So I'll turn the Ramsdale Theater question over to Ed.
So, Councilmember Sullivan, keep in mind that the Ramsdale Theater is owned by the city.
Right,
So
I understand that.
The 50,000 that the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts, the nonprofit, is requesting basically goes for maintenance and upkeep and maybe a little bit of utilities on the building. It's not really funding any of their programs. Those are pretty much funded through donations and ticket sales and sponsorships and advertising and things like that. So that baseline of funding just helps them to maintain the city's asset that we've invested, multiple millions of dollars over the years on.
Well, I guess my question is, why is it always a set 50,000? Like every year it's 50,000 in maintenance. Like, what if it's $35,000 one year? What are you doing with the rest of that? Like, why is it a set? I'm just curious as to why it's a set number every year.
Well, if you look at the utilities and the types of repairs and maintenance that are done over the course of the year, the building is aging. They spend pretty close to that amount of money. Some of that also does occasionally go for capital improvements to help make the city facility better. But without that funding, they would have to, try to fill that funding gap. And particularly with the COVID, they've been shut down for a period of time. They're only projecting 50% capacity in the upcoming year. So, I think the way that board looks at it is that this is, money that's going to maintain and preserve the city asset. The nonprofit that's using it is bringing in activities that are good for the community and good for the arts and culture and good for tourism. But that 50,000 kind of serves as a base funding to take care of the building.
I completely understand that, but it still doesn't answer my question. So how many years has it been 50,000 every year? Like, at what point? 50,000 every year, you're going to have a brand new building eventually. You can
I share my screen for a minute? Let me show something in the graph.
Jermaine, last year we took it down to 45,000.
Yeah, and basically, Jermaine, is we give them what we can afford to give them. There's, again, from time to time, there's bigger needs, but we can't fund everything, so you fund to what you can afford.
Are you able to see the budget document?
Yes.
Okay, so this chart, you asked about the level of support for the Ramsdale Theater. This chart shows what the operating amount, which is what we call it, that 50,000. And you can see back in 2009, it was 65,000. It was as high as $100,000 in 2014 and 2015. And that's about the time that the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts kind of got reincorporated, and council wanted that number to go down. So there was a goal to reduce that by 30%. And it's actually been reduced by over 50%. But that amount just seems to be a baseline to kind of operate the building, make sure that the restoration, is preserved and the building's taken care of to the best of the ability. So it has been reduced significantly. The capital outlay piece in red has been zeroed out entirely, and the debt service will be at that 108,000 for a number of years. That's for the remaining payments on the HVAC project.
Okay, so because of COVID, they haven't been open like they usually are. So maintenance and utilities on the building shouldn't be as high last year as they were the previous year. So I'm just trying to understand as to why, like, they have an appropriations here for more money on top of the 50,000. Am I
They don't.
correct?
They asked to restore, their appropriation request asked to restore it back to what their funding was last year.
Okay,
There was a number of appropriations that were reduced. Let me go to that page real quick. So the Ramsdale was reduced to 45,000. There was a number of other agencies that were funded that were reduced by 10%. Almost uniformly, all of those agencies asked for that cut to be restored, I think with the exception of Alternatives for Area Youth. But the MRA, the Saints, the Historical Museum, and the RCA all asked for that to be restored, primarily because of I think they're suffering from the COVID. But that shows you where it was last year and then what it is requested this year.
but in all honesty, they shouldn't really be short because most of these places weren't open because of COVID. So they weren't, you know, they didn't have the utilities and the maintenance and everything paying out, right?
Well, you're right. You're right that the utilities were reduced somewhat, but you still have to heat the building. It's a big building. The electricity is down some because you don't have the lights running for as many shows. But I can speak to the Ramsdale only. There was a fair amount of maintenance that was done on the inside of the building, taking advantage of the fact that there wasn't as much activity in there. So including some work on Hardy Hall, there was work done in the theater stage area itself. So the maintenance activities don't stop just because the building is shut down.
Okay, I understand that, but I just feel like these numbers are a lot of the same like every year when they should be fluctuating, if you know what I mean. Like, granted, we're
I
only,
guess the only thing I can speak for is, you know, I think the Ramsdale board, that's kind of over the history, that's kind of a baseline for what is spent on repairs, maintenance, utilities, and small capital projects. That's kind of what that's based on. And that does fluctuate, but it doesn't fluctuate dramatically.
We pay all
Okay.
those bills, don't we, Ed?
Could you say that again, Councilmember Grabowski?
Don't we pay all that when you needed the air conditioning, you needed the roof and that, we paid for all that separate?
Yes, I mean, those are expenses that no nonprofit really at this stage is going to be able to pay. So in order to protect the previous investment, it needed a new roof. It was at the end of its useful life. And then the HVAC system, when the restoration was done, they did put something on the theater side of the building, but the other side of the building, Hardy Hall and the ballroom, had nothing done. It still had the original boiler system. And as you recall, that had a pretty catastrophic failure, had the potential to actually burn the building down. But so that was something that was studied twice, one with Wade Trim and one with Avonmarsh before it was decided, council decided to go ahead and invest in that building with the HVAC system.
Right.
so I got one more question for you, Ed. So the funding that we're getting, can't we just put that aside? Like, do we have to use it like right now and give the chamber an extra 20? Can't we use that for something that comes along within the year, or does it have to be spent right now?
No, the ARP, the American Rescue Plan funding has to be spent within 3 years. So it does not have to be spent immediately.
If I could, Councilmember Sullivan, again, like I said, last week when we introduced the budget, those areas of starting our initiative for Housing North, additional money for economic development efforts, and money for blighted structures, we feel strongly that given the guidance we have right now, those are definitely allowable. And as I said last week, when we get two things, the exact amount of our how much they're going to give us, and number two, the final guidance, then we're going to have to engage with council and talk through how do we want to spend this and what are the initiatives. We just threw those in there because we were very confident that they met the rules of the guidance. And specifically with Housing North, there's been a lot of conversations on what can we do in the neighborhoods for housing. We know what we're up against for economic development. And then, the 30,000 for blighted structures, that's been, a hot topic in recent months with council. So that's all we did was, based on our guidance, we threw some things in there, knowing that when we get the final guidance, the exact amount, we got to engage with council and figure out what council wants to prioritize moving forward.
So the Housing North is just somebody coming in and telling us, where and how we should put in housing? Is that?
No. It's beyond that. We started with Project Rising Tide, trying to strategize how we could impact the neighborhoods and how we could improve our housing stock and the appearance of our community. There's a great program called the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, where council can reduce taxes on an individual home for a set period of time. Thought being that with that reduced annual tax burden, property owners would be able to afford a home improvement loan at some reduced rate at a financial institution. And as an example, maybe they need to put in new windows, or they want a new siding or something like that, so that we can incrementally improve our housing stock. Our current staff doesn't have the capacity to manage that program. So what we're looking at is to have someone come in and we can tell them, this is what we want done. Get out there and do it, and really put some things into action.
And this is Mick Szymanski. Again, I think it's one of the areas that will really help with flight, because again, this is another opportunity for our aged housing stock to be restored. And this is a program that has been real successful in other cities. St. Louis had a similar program, and they were able to turn over like 3,000 or 4,000 derelict buildings within a couple of years because of a program similar to this. So I think it would really help Manistee a lot. And the same thing with the money for the economic development. We've gotten a lot for our original investment in our economic development, but you can only get so much out of a person. I mean, I dare say he's probably working more than his 40 hours to do what he's done over the last year. And we want him to do more. And there's more to be done, but you can only do so much with 40 hours a week and one person doing it. So I think we're at a good crossroads with different projects coming to Manistee to be able to use some of that APR dollars to kind of boost, and keep us going. We've got momentum. We just need to keep pushing forward. That's my 2 cents.
Anybody else? Unmute yourself, Linda.
Okay, let's try this again. I just want to make sure those dollars are spent to try to help all areas of our city. That's my main concern, like Maxwell Town, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see economic development, more of it in Maxwell Town. They're struggling and they're trying their best. And they actually, I think they've risen to the occasion a few times, but it certainly would help if we would encourage the chamber to help them in that area. I just want to see it spread out. I mean, it doesn't all have to be in one area of the city. If short-term rentals turn neighborhoods around because property owners pay attention to it, why not have more of them down on the other side of the river? But on the south side, I think that's only makes sense to me. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's how I feel about it.
And I agree with you. I think that's the whole idea of the enterprise zone, is to get money into areas like that where we've got so many, rundown houses. And they're, again, it's not just a matter of putting siding on them. I mean, most of those houses, they need plumbing, they need electricity, they need heating systems, just to make them livable again. And it's not little amounts of money. It's big dollars in some cases.
Councilmember Beaton, I want to make sure you fully understand is that at this point right now, that the chamber is reacting to economic development inquiries that come into the city. Example, the Gateway project, the hotel project down by the beach, the river water project. They helped out with the Hollander project, the boathouse, things that have come to them, and they're just not having the time to go and target a certain building or a certain section of town because they're so overworked on the other area. So that's just what we're trying to do, is help them get out of this reactive mode and maybe more targeted economic development efforts.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So with the increase of 20,000 for the chamber, did they present any kind of plan with that money?
Their
coming to them,
plan
like
is to hire an additional person. I do know that, as an example, the Industrial Development Corporation increased their contributions. I believe I'm correct in saying the hospital did, Blarney Castle, others that are seeing that there is a need for increased capacity. And others, not just the city, are working towards getting enough money for them to hire an additional person. Did Ed answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Mr. Taylor, it's my understanding that we have more requests for service from the chamber than we've ever had, and they're actually having trouble keeping up, and maybe are feeling like they might be letting some things slide.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say they're letting things slide.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah, oh, I understand. Yeah, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that they're addressing them when they can. But certainly we have a number of high priority projects, not only just working on those projects, but putting together a developers day, doing, business retention visits, outreach. There's a myriad programs that they're involved in. It's just a balancing act. And right now, it's really out of balance.
From what I understand, I just make it short that there's a lot coming in. They need more people to do a good job, a better job.
That's a good summary.
I understand that they have a lot of projects going on in the Lakeshore project and all of the projects on River Street, but it doesn't take that long to pick up the phone and call somebody that's not on River Street and not on Lakeshore, just to see if they need something or if they need, help in different areas. Like I brought this up, I think a year ago, about reaching out to other businesses that weren't on River Street, and the response I got was we sent them a mailer. So I feel like that's where my issue is with the chamber at the moment. Like if it's not on River Street, or if it's not a big, huge, project, then it just kind of gets swept away because now they don't have time for it.
Yeah, I understand, your perspective. I don't know that that's a fair characterization, because these projects.
But it was said in a meeting, like it was said, we sent out a mailer when I
And that
asked.
could be one of their outreach efforts. I don't know that that's their sole outreach. So that,
Okay.
So getting back to the budget, I got a question on the money that we have to Morton Park. That's our share, correct? That's the city share?
Councilmember Samansky, I think
Yeah.
that was intended to be used, if we can get additional money from Morton Solar Corporation or other donors, we would, but that is enough money to do some meaningful work there. I think DPW Director McCullough could probably elaborate on that a little bit, but the intention was to do something even if we didn't get any matching money.
Okay, so that's really seed money, but hopefully we can get some other donations or some other revenues to come in to kind of do a little bit more than, although 35,000 is a great start. I think it would take a little bit more than that to make a first-class park.
Yes, I don't think it was intended to meet all the needs of the park, but
Right.
Jeff, can you mention what you had in mind for that?
Yeah, the Parks Commission several years ago had kind of master planned a vision for that park. And it included 1 or 2 new playground sets and a row of fencing, and a large portion of that area be used as a dog run, which simply would require 1 row of fence and some water to be added. And then there was some other uses. There was also the addition of a small parking lot, so because there's no off-street parking there. I have had conversations with the plant manager at Morton. From a local perspective, they are more than happy and excited to assist with that, with the park improvements. But Morton is, the parent company of Morton Salt is changing hands right now. And so they were not willing to commit to anything until after the acquisition takes place. And then we can further those discussions. But I thought that this money was, just like Ed said, without any other contributions, we could do something meaningful there and have an impact on the neighborhood.
Yep, I agree. I'd like to see some, a small little picnic area perhaps as well, so that families have a place to go and sit down and enjoy that outdoor setting as well. It doesn't have to be terribly elaborate, but a little start.
Yep, and that was actually in that plan too, is to set several picnic tables, and then we've got the permanent grills in stock that we can install there as well.
Great.
I'd like to go ahead.
The only other thing that have we any money set aside for replacing our welcome signs with our new logos?
Right now, there's nothing in the, specifically earmarked in the budget for that. That would have to come out of departmental operating budgets. That's certainly something we could look at, doing bit by bit and maybe slotting some more money in a future year.
Or maybe APR might have something that we might be able to edge towards that as well. I'd like to, again, we get a lot of comments and about the condition of the signs and the outdated nature of them. So if we could at least put a placeholder in, that would be great.
Councilman Szymanski, this is Jeff McCullough. Yep. I appreciate those comments, because in my department, we've had those conversations since I joined the city 8 years ago. And about all we can do to them is remove the overgrown shrubbery, which we have done, but they are in desperate need of being updated. Yeah. And I would support a full project of that in the future.
And again, we've got, if we had monument signs on those 2 areas, I think that would do a lot to kind of improve the first impression of Manistee as well.
Okay, I'd like to go back to the chamber for a minute. Mark, are you there?
I am, Mayor. I am here.
I think you were trying to get on to say something. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I just wanted to address a couple of the concerns that we've heard tonight from several councilors. The effort to work across city areas, we do have projects that we work with. Certainly in Maxwell Town, we have provided assistance to the new owner at 314 Sibben and have several meetings with him, as well as referred him to the SBDC for some plans for some work on developing work plans and pro forma documents. And we also have provided assistance and guidance on the Oprah program to a prospective buyer of one of the older and now closed restaurants on 8th Street to turn that into a housing project. So we're waiting to hear more back from them on that particular project. There are other work that we've done outside of the DDA and some within the county as well, but we are trying to be as responsive as we can. There are a number of challenges that we're working to address, and it's not just the large projects. We're trying to build capacity, but both in terms of the housing needs in the community and with economic development, having more capacity would help us a great deal. And I think that's what is being acknowledged in staff responses about the increase. We'll be able to do more and have more effect. And you can argue that we've had a significant amount of impact in the last several years, but we certainly will be able to do more with a little bit more funding. And many of the other players that are funding the economic development program have stepped up, as Mr. Taylor said, including Little River and the hospital and Blarney Castle and others, and including the manufacturers, all have stepped up to increase the funding to try to get us to this goal of having more of an impact with greater capacity. But certainly we're not focused on any one particular area. It is really reacting to what's available and what needs are there and what stages the developments or the entrepreneurs are in. That kind of drives the kind of triage that we have with our effort. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, is there any questions for Mr. Miller? Okay, seeing none, we need to go back to the budget. Any other questions about the budget? Any other
Yes.
concerns?
Grubeski here, Mayor. In regards to this park on Third Street, the problem I have with that is in Jeff's description of the park, there's 16 parks in the city, compromises 183 acres. You got Lake Michigan beaches, 3.5 miles of bikeways and walkways. The Parks Department has got 2 men, and in summertime, they get a few people more. I don't mind fixing the thing up a little bit for dog runs and parking lots. But the problem is, can we afford to put another 35,000 into another park? We got all these other 16 parks that the guys are having a hard enough time trying to keep them clean.
Well, my comment would be the park is already exists. I just think it's a shame to have a park and have it look as bland is the best word I can come up with at the moment. As is ineffectual. There's really, it's a park, but it's not a park. It's just a big piece of land. And I think the folks down in the east end of town deserve to have a nice park that they can walk to and enjoy, just like some of the other neighborhoods.
Well, should we close up some of the other parks though, so we can open up that park?
There's a possibility, but
I actually live right down the street from that park, and it would have been nice. Like, my son's going to be 16 tomorrow. It would have been nice if it was like a park when he was younger.
Yep.
But I think that if we just, put up some new basketball hoops and some soccer nets and some benches, they would be happy with that. Like, I don't think that we need to spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to make it this elaborate park. They would be happy with a nice basketball court and some nets. Like, that would be sufficient down there.
Yeah, and I will mention that the playground equipment that used to be there was had aged to the point where it was dangerous to the children, and so almost all of it has been removed in the past 6 years.
So it wouldn't cost that much just to put up some basketball hoops and some benches, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be this it's by a factory, so it doesn't need to be this elaborate state-of-the-art park.
But Jermaine, if you're a toddler, the basketball hoop isn't going to do you a whole lot of good.
Well, it hasn't done a whole lot of good in the last 10 years because the equipment's been junk.
Well, that's what
so
I'm saying.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah, but again, I think for young families to have some place to go and enjoy is important as well. And we do have like Mr. Grabowski has said, there are several other parks all the way around, just none down in the east end of Manistee.
Well, what I'm looking for is, can the park department handle another park? You know, the 16 parks is in 1.83 acres, or 183 acres. It says 1.5 miles from Lake Michigan. That's a lot of area to cut and service.
Mr. McCullough, is not Morton Park included in our park list?
Morton Park is one of the city parks. It's land owned by Morton Salt Company, but the city has a long-term lease for park usage. We maintain that part. To answer your question, Councilman Grabowski, with 2 people full-time and summer help, it's a challenge to maintain that vast park system. It really is. And we're trying to get creative with how we organize and how we schedule them and the equipment we use. But that park still is mowed in rotation with all the other parks. What the Parks Commission had envisioned was utilizing a large portion of the open space as a dog run. Right now we have a dog park down at First Street Beach, but it's pretty small, and this would be a kind of an enclosed place for people to throw a ball or a frisbee and really just let the dogs run. To Councilwoman Sullivan's point, there was there was a plan in there to make that basketball court bigger because it's quite small right now, and putting up a couple hoops really isn't that expensive. We did discuss putting in a water service so that there could be water for the dogs, but also a drinking fountain for other visitors, picnic tables, grills. And then at the time that Morton had offered grant money, there was a discussion of putting in 2 separate play structures, because the play structures today are made for specific age group ranges. But we could certainly select one that has different age components within it and just do one structure. And that doesn't add a whole lot of maintenance. The things that I've discussed don't add a whole lot more maintenance to what we already do in the park, right? Especially when they're newer items.
Anybody else have any questions on the budget or concerns?
I have concern about the increase in the water and sewer rates. If you can kind of explain about that.
Sure, Councilmember Pontiac. As you recall, the rate study that we did a number of years ago called for an annual 3.5% inflationary adjustment each year. In order to maintain our operating cash flow and also our working capital, it's pretty critical that we have that rate maintained. What that does is it prevents a large rate increase as projects and things come along. We are planning on refreshing that rate study. We have money in the budget to do that, probably starting in October, November of this year for the next upcoming budget. But in the absence of that, the 3.5% allows us to make sure we're not running a deficit and able to continue to fund the improvements in the systems. And yet it's not a real large increase like they've had in the past.
I would also like to point out that we just bonded for over $6 million in our rural development phase 1 and another 18 million in our rural development phase 2. And we were able to absorb that debt service within that existing rate structure because we've been slowly increasing the rates year after year and didn't need to do one large increase.
And then I had another question. On page, what is it, 123, it's labeled PEG, but I think it was labeled wrong. It's about the utilities.
Oh, yes, it does have a problem on the heading. I'll correct that in the final copy. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, but there's, so there's a line item for residential recycling fees. I didn't think we were doing residential recycling.
So we do residential recycling. We're not paying for the cardboard, but for the other recycling bins that are down at MCC, the city does pay for those through its reference fund.
The metal and plastic, we are still doing recycling for that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Martin Pontiac, perhaps you were referring to the curbside recycling?
Yeah, that's what I was.
We no longer, that's been phased out, but we still offer residents those recycling opportunities. They just, it's not going to be curbside. They have to take it to another location.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question. And at some point, we have to obviously buy another fire truck with a 100-foot plus ladder on it. I know that not all trucks are built the same size-wise. Do we know that there's still a number of models available for us to select from when it comes time to buy this vehicle that will fit within our fire department? Why is Jeff smiling?
Yeah, currently we've been working with different dealers. There's a vendor that we've been talking with, and we were able to park a couple of the apparatus right in the station. So as long as the manufacturers keep making it, it's a tight fit, but I'm sure that that's going to continue down the road.
Okay.
We are limited to the size of our structure.
Okay.
I was only smiling because we had to modify the structure to fit the existing truck in there, but I think everybody's well aware of that now.
Anybody else? Mr. Taylor, do you have anything?
Nothing further.
Mr. Bradford, any highlights?
No, Mayor, I just want to thank all the department heads for their efforts and helping me put together the budget, as well as the city manager. It went very well this year. It had the potential to be very challenging, but everybody really worked hard on getting what they needed and not necessarily what they wanted. And I think we addressed all of council priorities that they identified early on, and I think it really helps to move the city forward. So that's my only comments.
Where are we at with the budget now? We have another work session coming up and we need a public hearing, is that right?
So for the next week, there is the public hearing scheduled and a work session after the regular meeting if needed. And then there was an optional work session scheduled for the 4th Tuesday. And then the schedule anticipates the budget being adopted at the first meeting in May.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns on the budget? Hearing none, then we'll move on to others. I believe at the next council meeting, we'll kind of get a consensus as to whether or not we're ready to adopt the budget. Right now, Heather, could you call on the council members to see if they have anything else they'd like to talk about?
Sure. Councilmember Bachman,
I do not. Thanks, Heather.
Councilmember Beaton,
I don't have anything further.
Councilmember Sullivan.
I know you guys are all sick of hearing me this evening. I just have one more question about the Oprah that we gave the guy on 314 7th Street. I think that was like in October, November. Is there a time frame for him to start doing stuff on the building, or can he just let it sit there? Or
Mark, do you have something to offer on that? Please do.
Yeah. So the gentleman is still working through plans on what would be feasible for the structure and for a business model. And so he has been seeking some input on how to approach providing a mixed use building and has some plans in place for doing that correctly. But is still working through some of those issues. And so right now, I wouldn't want to offer up a timeline for a start. I think he still has some questions to answer on that for his own model, as well as trying to put together some of the documentation that he'll need to apply for grants and for other incentives. So he's moving forward, he's making progress, but I'm not sure that he's ready to pull the trigger on moving the project forward, at least.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that he was actually doing something and it wasn't going to be a vacant building for the next 6 years.
Yeah, no, he's
Okay.
moving forward, and there's a good deal of work to do from the structural standpoint. So we've been in contact with him several times and have been working with Joni Krolchek from SBDC to help him as well. So it's been a team effort. It's going to take a little bit more effort as well.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Are we anywhere with the boarded up buildings on River Street?
Yes, well, I just got updated at yesterday's or this morning's staff meeting. They issued each building owner a second citation. And so those are working, then that was just done recently. So they're continuing to keep the heat on those property owners.
Okay, what's the next step after the second citation?
Josh, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, it's currently in the court process, so we would anticipate the city attorney getting the judge to award some type of judgment or order to the courts. That's typically what happens at that point.
Okay. I'm all done. I have nothing else. I'm done.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Yes, I think this article in the paper, no application submitted yet for Manistee Gateway. Are we any place with the buildings, anything going to be done, or are we going to be sitting there now?
Well, I can offer some, and Mark, obviously feel free to chime in as appropriate. We've had a series of meetings with Little River Holdings, our brownfield consultant and staff, to talk through how we could approach Eagle about a grant and or loan to, at a minimum, tear down the buildings and maybe even do some mitigation on the soils. So we're working through that process so we can get the property ready for the development.
Are you suggesting we tear them down, the city tear them down?
No, it would be with monies from Eagle, former DEQ, and where we could get a grant and loan. It would run through either the brownfield or the city itself, and then would be paid back by the developer, whether it's through a TIF or otherwise. But we're still working on, what we need to submit an application to Eagle.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
I've got nothing. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Szymanski.
Just a couple of quick ones. One, is it possible to share with the community the extent of the work that we're going to be doing on the Riverwalk? Give them an idea, an inkling of what it's going to look like when it's finished. And then the second thing is the DDA going to brief their budget at the next meeting? Are we going to get a little bit more details from somebody from the DDA on their budget input and their requests?
Councilmember Szymanski, on the DDA budget, we do have Christina here if there's any questions, and she's planning on being at the work session next week as well. So certainly if you have questions on the DDA budget, she's able to answer those.
Okay.
As far as the Riverwalk, Councilman Szymanski, are you talking about where we're doing the revetment work down at First Street?
Yes. And
So,
then
go ahead.
where the wall caved in and all of that, how is that going to be restructured? And I know people have asked that, if we could use, any, as much natural resources as possible, like the dune grass, like you're using on the other place, to enhance whatever we're doing. And I just hadn't seen anything visually on what it's going to look like when it's done.
So I'll try to describe this without getting into too much detail, but basically what we're doing is we're setting the largest stones that you see down there are toe stones, and those will be submerged underwater. From those become the foundation, and then we're putting other larger stones, but not as large, and we're kind of stepping those back up the bank. And we have designed the stone to go beyond the ordinary high water level, and they actually go up several feet so that we have what we call a splash zone. Okay, so we recognize that the water levels come up high, but then wave action also pushes them and splashes them. The river walk, as opposed to being a wooden walkway like it was, will be pipe pile supported. Well, I'm sorry, it will be concrete, poured concrete on top of the concrete. Let me back up. It will be poured concrete on top of the stone revetment that is much higher than the water level is today, and then there will be railing along it. So where the wooden river walk is now, kind of coming around the bend heading to the west, it will slowly increase in elevation to get up, and it will, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it should be about 5 foot higher than the previous was. So it will be out of the area of danger. And by raising that portion up, it also reduces the slope of soil from the river walk back up to that retaining wall that failed. And so that retaining wall will be reconstructed essentially the way that it was, but the foundation of it will be further buried and will be solidified better so that we don't have that issue again.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Zelinski?
I just want to thank everybody that worked so hard on the budget. Good job. Thank you for your efforts. It's much appreciated. With that, we're adjourned.